Let's continue getting response on the Trump victory. Emily Jashinsky is D.C. correspondent at Unherd. Emily, good afternoon to you.
Hi there.
Nice to have you with us. Your response, firstly, as we're asking all of our guests today on this, what is clearly a very convincing win for Donald Trump. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that phrase you just used says it. Very convincing win for Donald Trump. Now, most people expected, based on the map, that this would be either a very convincing win for Kamala Harris or a nail-biter, whoever won, whether it was Trump or Harris. And instead, it went totally in the other direction with basically a swing state sweep. That's another sort of glaring problem for pollsters as they're recouping and getting ready for the midterm elections is what are they still missing? How are they still missing this phenomenon? Huge gains with Latino voters. One of the big questions for Republicans here in Washington, D.C., just in the next couple of months and then further beyond that couple of years, can they keep that up when Donald Trump is not on the ticket? Because we hadn't seen that happen before last night. So there were the midterm elections in 2022. It was supposed to be a red wave.
Yeah.
Didn't materialize, something like that. So will Latino voters start voting more Republican when Donald Trump's not on the ballot? Can Republicans actually make those gains permanent? That's a huge question for them going forward.
Yeah, and there's quite a lot, as I'm sure, as best we can, crunching the numbers and looking at all the data. There's lots of curious things about this. Where he won, who voted for him. And the kind of numbers that we're talking about. And, of course, there's still more results to come, which may even compound the very conversation we're having, Emily. And I thought it was interesting that you rightly said that the polls were kind of off on this one. Did they just... I wonder whether in at least one of those polling offices they did see this result and thought, well, we can't say that because that's going to make us look a bit weird because all the others are saying this. And, whilst they don't rig their own polls, did they, I wonder whether they softened the impact in some mechanism that you can legally do within polling so they didn't look as if they were a bit bonkers. But if somebody had called it, they'd have been the richest polling company on the planet right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you look at the Real Clear Politics polling averages, Trump was up in many of the swing states, but he was up just by a little bit. Such a small margin. Right. Yeah, exactly. And then he was actually down in places like Michigan and Wisconsin, where it now looks like he's going to end up taking it. So what the pollsters are going to say is that it was a marginal election and we were close. Nate Silver, ahead of the election, said, what we can be sure of is that there will be a polling error. We just don't know which direction the error is going to go in. And what happened is there was an error in the direction that basically nobody expected it to go, which meant a sweep for Donald Trump. So it's possible that there were outlier polls we didn't see. But also, I mean, Trump was doing well. It's sort of like 2016. If you go back and look at some of the polls in 2016, he was doing better than people remember. It was just nobody took those polls seriously. And nobody took the idea that he could hold on to those leads seriously. And that's where it landed them in 2016 and did it again now.
People will have their own ideas as to, what happened. I think there's an entire Netflix series in what happened, and I'm sure we'll get it at some point soon. It's arguably being made as we speak. People will be rushing to the cutting room to put this thing together. But there are some interesting, obvious points that we can pick up on. I mean, the famous garbage comment now, which came from Biden, did that have an effect? Did a lot of people that weren't going to vote for Trump suddenly vote for him? Kamala Harris on the back of that, I'm sure she was absolutely floored by her boss saying that, but she then sort of she went to really focus on women's rights and issues around that. From what I'm seeing, though, Emily, the vote from women didn't grow at all for Kamala Harris, no more than it did with Joe Biden. So even something as seismic and very important as that, because if that is your deciding area, the electorate have different ideas as to what's important to them. That's a democracy. It didn't seem to impact the female vote in the States.
This is a really good point, because in the swing states, Wisconsin and Michigan, think about Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump looks like he's going to end up winning by 3. Not something people would have predicted yesterday. That means that Donald Trump was able to run up his margins with men in a way that this is a low propensity voter. A lot of people say, women are just going to vote more they're just going to be more on top of the ball. They're going to get their ballots in. They're going to go to the polls. But when you have comments like the garbage one, when you have the Joe Rogan endorsement, the Elon Musk endorsement, that I think will be looked back on, and rightfully so, as these moments of galvanization that actually probably did animate people to get off the couch. There's that sort of famous couch or vote person, and that probably was a pretty powerful. And when you're talking about just needing to move a few tens of thousands of people in either direction, that's going to make a big difference when we look back on this.
Yeah, I wonder if the celebrity endorsement thing is rather interesting. It's the same here, that the left tend to get more the celebrities. We had Everett, Lady Gaga, J-Lo, all manner of people. Oprah Winfrey almost made it into a TV show. She was on the telly so much in recent weeks. Even Fox gave her a bumper platform on a regular basis. She was opining over why it would be the end of the world if Trump won, and why her girl should be the person that remains in the White House in a more senior position. Who knows whether that has an effect, whether people think, hang on a second, I'm not going to take my politics from Lady Gaga, for goodness sake, and J-Lo crying her eyes out.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination, whereas the celebrities that ended up rallying around Donald Trump are people from like the UFC world and the podcast world that are really, really popular with men. And on top of that, those celebrities tend to be opposed to the Beyoncés and the J-Los. And so what it does is, we start seeing this gender gap, as you mentioned before. It's one of those things that can really electrify men who say, this is important for me to go vote because I need to give a middle finger, essentially, to elites like Oprah, who are telling me exactly what I should do, and saying that this could be the last time we're able to cast ballots, which is something that Oprah said on the eve of the election if Donald Trump wins. Yeah. That stuff is very, very moving for people to actually get out and vote.
I sat here in the early hours, Emily, waiting to cross live to Washington for for Kamala Harris to address the watch party diligently. Her support base was there. Trump's guys were down there in Palm Beach in Florida, while the president-to-be was making his way in his cavalcade to a party. Kamala Harris went to bed. What was that all about?
They dismissed their supporters fairly early, and they're right down the road from where I am right here. And they didn't do what Hillary Clinton did and book the Javits Center in New York City to plan and shatter the glass ceiling. They didn't quite have anything like that orchestrated, but they had this massive setup at Howard University, a historically black college here in Washington, D.C. Yeah. And the backdrop was pretty, they set that up to be pretty powerful. It wasn't sort of a stage and a convention center in West Palm Beach like the Trump campaign had. But they dismissed people pretty early. Things were, the Washington Post described it as like an eerie quiet just a couple of hours ago here in D.C. And they said, go home, get some rest. We feel good about the blue wall states. We always knew they were going to be close. And when that happened, Pennsylvania hadn't been called yet, but it told us that their internal numbers looked like they understood Pennsylvania would soon be called, because that is what they needed. Because
it hadn't been called, but that I think they counted about 70-odd% by that stage, and they kind of perhaps knew which way this was going to go.
Yeah, that's it. They must have seen the writing on the wall, essentially, and we're trying to avoid having all of those images of people being gathered at the party when Pennsylvania is called for Donald Trump that are seared into the public's consciousness from 2016 at the Javits Center. That stuff lives a long time, and they, to some extent, avoided it.
Well, we just understand, by the way, we're just hearing that NBC is saying that Harris is expected to call Trump today to concede and will speak publicly, according to two of her aides. Timing to be confirmed. Apparently, in the meantime, she's working on her speech, one of the aides said. Biden also plans to call Trump today and plans to speak publicly about the election results, according to a White House official. We're still waiting on timings of that. All that you would expect to happen. I just think perhaps there's a bit of a surprise that Kamala Harris has yet to speak as we sit here many hours after it was quite apparent that she'd lost.
Yeah, I'm sure she is trying to figure out exactly how to phrase her approach to Donald Trump, because the sort of Democratic establishment here in Washington, D.C. prizes itself on respecting norms and respecting civility. But again, she had Oprah going out and telling everybody this could be the last time you're able to cast a ballot. There was a lot of apocalyptic rhetoric. So now the task before her is to, marry those 2 points to square the circle of, hey, we want to look like we love norms and civility, but also we've been telling you for months that this guy is a fascist. So what do you say in that case? And I'm sure she's working on it.
Yeah. How do you call a fascist on the phone and just say, hey, fascist, how you doing? It's Kamala here. Well done, mate. And then you just put the phone down. Maybe it's as straightforward as that. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Emily, thank you for your time. Appreciate that. That's Emily Jashinsky, D.C. correspondent at Unherd. Reference that last point as well.